Okay, we're rolling. So I thought today might be a cool day to talk a little bit about equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we could focus on uh, electric guitar and bass guitar.
Sure.
And maybe we can talk about amps. We can talk about cabinets, but then obviously the instrument, maybe strings, maybe string gauges. That's a thing too. Pickups.
Yeah.
The kinds of guitars for styles of music, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
All of that kind of stuff. So maybe we can start with guitar and then kind of go into to bass a little bit.
Yeah, and I would probably put it under the guise of being a functional player, because pretty much if you're doing strictly a solo thing and you're having your own identity and your own sound, you can play with whatever tone, whatever sound you want, and there's never a wrong tone, I guess, technically.
Right.
But so it gets a little more specific when you start dealing with live gigs, and especially with recording.
Yes. Absolutely. So what I mean, so let's jump right in with guitar. What are your thoughts? Like, let's talk about kinds of guitars maybe first, and then maybe dig into.
Yeah. The three basic when it comes to functional playing, the sounds wise, you have your Strat, Telly, and sort of a Les Paul thing.
Yeah.
That's the three basics. Of course, you can get into different other tones outside of that, but with most popular music, funk, blues, gospel, R&B, all those pop, those are the three main sounds. And I mean, I'm not endorsed by Fender at all. But when it comes to what's that?
Maybe you will be after this video.
Yeah, right. Well, I think the Telly and the Strat, Fender has, generally speaking, the lockdown on that.
Yes. Absolutely.
The company that makes my basses out of Italy, called Multi-Instrumentalist, they're building right now for me their very first guitar. They've been doing basses for 15, 20 years, but they're going to try the first guitar, and they want me to be the first person to try out the Strat.
That's great, man.
Thanks. So I got to give a shout out to Multi-Instrumentalist. But
let's get it in.
But as far as classic sounds, the Fender Strat and the Fender Telly, those are pretty much staples. The different types of woods affect the texture of the sound. Maple neck versus a rosewood versus an ebony versus that's when you start to get into your own personality of sounds. But generally speaking, the rosewood fretboard is a good starting point.
Okay.
Maple necks have a brighter, punchier tone to them. But rosewood has punch, but with a warmth over it. And a lot of times, guitar, particularly in the between the 1 and 2.5K frequency range, have sort of a annoying bitey sound, and the rosewood neck sort of tames that a little more.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, very, very, very cool. Now, how about okay? So you were talking about Stratocaster.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have some thoughts on which pickup position you should be using for what style of music?
Yeah, it depends. Like
or what role you're playing. Maybe I should.
And that's what I was about to say. It depends on what role you're playing, because really the changing qualifying attribute is thickness or thinness. So if you're playing like busy rhythm behind, and the instrumentation is wider, you got keyboards, you have synths going, and you just sort of need like a rhythm tone that is more, I would say, probably thinned out. you'd use more of your bridge pickup, but the neck pickup is more if you're doing like a John Mayer type rhythm guitar, where it's more like a trio, and the guitar voice itself has a thicker presence.
Yeah.
Then I think you would use more of the neck pickup. But generally, for me, in a functional sense, when I record, I'm either using the blend, which is literally both equally, or I'm using more of the bridge.
Okay. On a Strat, for me, like two of my favorite sounds are the second and fourth position, because they're using either the neck in the middle pickup or the middle in the bridge. In the middle in the bridge, it takes a little bit of that almost unusable kind of twangy, edgy sound that a Stratocaster has with just the bridge pickup.
Yeah.
It's almost like that pickup is only useful if you have like some overdrive or distortion on.
Right.
But if you are going to use it in a different sort of context, then it's almost like you need to soften the blow a little bit. And so that like fourth pickup position seems to be one that a lot of guys like. And then in the same way, like for playing like rhythm guitar, if you want it like you were using the sort of thick versus thin, the second pickup position will thin out the neck a little bit. So then you can still be somewhat warm, but then also kind of stay out the way. It's what do they call that kind of a I can't remember what they call that kind of a quacky kind of in between the real warm sound. A lot of guys like that middle pickup too, just on the middle.
Yeah.
That rhythm playing. But yeah, it's totally like you said about the roll. One interesting thing about the difference between a Stratocaster and a Telecaster, which makes the bridge pickup in a Telecaster much more usable, is that there's a metal plate under the bridge pickup that really warms up the sound of that pickup if you compare it to Stratocaster. Well, it was first. It actually historically was first, and then the Stratocaster came out. So I suppose I should say that the Strat is brighter than its predecessor, the Telecaster. And that's one of my favorite, like the Telecaster, like Robin Ford Telecaster, Robin Ford. And of course he's playing through that expensive stuff. He's playing through that Dumble, that $30,000 sound.
$30,000 sound.
That's right. I ain't got no $30,000 with that, but he's playing on that. And probably my favorite pickup combination on a Telecaster, though, is what Mike Stern has on his guitar, and that's the single coil in the bridge and a humbucker in the neck. And you see a lot of guys do that because then you can get anywhere from a lot warmer, like jazz tone almost, in the neck, and then obviously you have a middle position which will give you neck and that bridge pickup, but then you have the sort of customary tones that you can get out of the bridge. Of course, a lot of country guys like the Telecaster.
Well, yeah, the Tele, specifically with country, and the bridge pickup has that gnarly sound. I think that's probably the best. When I think gnarl, that R, it's really that mid-range 1K to really between like 800 and 1200. That range that sort of sticks out in the mix, particularly with like solos. Yeah. So when you put like a overdrive or distortion on that, it has like that classic country sound that everyone's used for the last 30 years.
Absolutely. Now, how about the difference? So how about the difference between humbucker pickups and single coil pickups? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think they're both colors. In the world that I deal with, as far as more on the recording side, song to song has different textures, and single coil is the wrong texture for one. Single coil is a perfect texture for this other one.
Right.
You know, humbuckers are the wrong. That's not the right tone, and it's the perfect one for the other. So it's sort of, they just have different textures. So I don't think it's a wrong or right, or for me even a favorite versus not preferred. I think if you need to be a functional player that can cover a lot of tones, to have both is good. A lot of guys get the humbucker that has a switch that can collapse down.
Yeah.
That works. Certainly, I would encourage that if budget doesn't allow you to have both. But if you collapse a humbucker, it's not going to sound as true as a true single coil in most cases.
Right.
So I think it's just they're all textures and colors.
Yeah. So one of the possible benefits of a humbucker over a single coil is that single coil you're going to get a hum. It's noisy.
Mm-hmm.
So if a person is sort of primarily using single coil, and I'd say even in a recording, especially in a recording situation, then they may want to look into some kind of noise suppression on the front of the sound, so that you're not noticing that you're getting that kind of noise. Especially if you kick the overdrive on, and then it really boosts the noise. Humbuckers, you have no noise. That was actually the creation of the humbucker, was to cancel out the noise. The hum. That's right. It was buck to hum. That's right.
Buck that hum, boy.
That's right. That's right. And now some guitars, like I've got an AX40 Music Man. It's Eddie Van Halen's guitar, and it's based on kind of a Telecaster Stratocaster sort of thing, where the neck is a 25.5 scale length. But what he did was, that's different, is he's got two zebra humbuckers, but the spacing between the humbuckers is it's different than other guitars. It's not the same spacing as would be like on a Les Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's got a 5-position switch, but none of the positions are single coil, although you get some single coil kind of sounds.
Right. What
it does is it splits the pickups, but there's never hum. But so like one of the positions, so like position 5 all the way down, that position is just the bridge humbucker. Position 1 is just the neck humbucker. Position 3 is neck and bridge. Position 2 is like the outer coils of both pickups. And then position 4 is the inner coils.
Yeah.
So you get tones that are more single coil sounding, because you're using one coil, but they're also hum canceling.
Right.
So that's a setup like that could get you kind of a wide array of tones that could be useful for several things. Also, like you suggested, if you have to have, if all you can get is a Les Paul, then try to get one that's got split pickups. It has a pickup splitting, option. That's always a good thing. And then some of the Strats have noiseless pickups.
Yeah.
Kevin Turner, his Strat has noiseless pickups on it.
Yeah.
Some guys don't like the noiseless pickups. I think part of it is psychological, because guys, I think they think that if it's a noiseless pickup, that some kind of way it's cutting off some of the frequency range, and that actually is true in some of the designs, but they have some really good noiseless designs now that sound great and still have all of the sizzle and everything that you want.
Yeah, I think if you just add into your, not to get off in the tangent of pedals, which of course we all know we could, but having a simple a gate set at a very low decibel level can cancel some of that hum, and you can still keep the natural sound of the guitar.
That's right. That's right.
And I mean, just as time goes further, the contemporary design of a lot of circuitry for a lot of these guitars are dealing with that, to where you know, a lot of those, unless you're playing around neon lights all the time, you're not going to get a lot of that, you know, that stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. How about like string gauges? I'm always interested in like what gauges guys are playing on. And you played bass first, just like me. And did that have an effect or an influence on the string gauges that you used when you started playing guitar? What felt natural? What felt good to you?
Tens initially felt good to me, and they still do. I mean, most guitars I play are 10 gauges, but for that, like that real funky James Brown thing, nines have like that thin rhythm. I would definitely have a Strat that has 9.
I got you.
A Strat that has 9s, really, for a Telly and Les Paul or anything else. I personally use 10s, but I know some guys use 11s and 12s. I think when you do 11s and 12s to me are great for blues. Like when I did a lot of touring with blues acts, the guitar players mostly had 11s and 12s. And a lot of times I would play at like big blues festivals, so I'd see a lot of guitar players, and you know, you go backstage in the green room and all of them are back there. Of course, everyone was talking about gear. So, what kind of strings you play, man? What gauge? You know, so most of them most of them answer, you know, 11s and 12s, because it's a great thick sound, particularly for soloing. And of course, you know, in jazz, that thicker gauge, you sort of get that Pat Metheny thing, you know, like a really thick tone. Although, honestly, I don't know what gauge Pat plays, so I haven't done that research, but I know it gets that tone. But in functional rhythm playing, the thinner gauge, like 10s mostly, and then I think 9s are my choice.
Now, let me ask you this. Of course, you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan played on 13s. Now, that's a buddy of mine. He refers that as being sweat guitar. So you're going to sweat when you play. I played on those 13s. But he also detuned by a half step. His guitar was tuned E flat. It was like an E flat instead of like a standard in E.
Right.
Okay, so what kind of material? Like it seems to me that most guitar players are playing on nickel round wound strings, as opposed to like bass players that may favor steel strings. It just depends on what style of music. Obviously, we can talk about flat wounds. We can talk about, you know, even flat wounds on bass, and talk about how, you know, some styles of music, especially like classic R&B, old school R&B, and talk about P basses versus active basses. I mean, we can get into a lot of stuff. We don't talk as much about that with guitar, but there's active pickups for guitars also. Just depends on what style of music that you're playing. Stuff that we're talking about is all passive stuff, because you're already kind of playing in a higher range, and you already have the potential of like hitting some sort of frequency levels that are sort of like this sort of scratching your fingernails down the chalkboard. You know, and steel may exacerbate that because it's, might be too much.
Yeah.
But so what are you playing on? Are you playing on nickel strings, or what do you?
Yeah, I've always used nickel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever used steel on electric guitar. I can't speak to it. Maybe they're awesome, but I know most of the guys I know and myself are use nickel strings.
Frank Gambale uses steel.
Okay.
And by listening to his tone, I was somewhat surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Because he doesn't have a bright, like what I would consider to be like a really bright, like, you know, upper mid edgy, too much harmonic series on top of the sound. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have that, like some guys call it tube sizzle. He doesn't have that kind of sound on top. Even when you hear him play clean, when you hear him play like roll his tone down and play on his neck pickup, it doesn't sound like that, what you think steel strings would sound like on guitar. But that's fun.
I think using steel strings is I think you have the ability to go as bright as you want. I mean, I feel like you can always, to answer what you just said, you can always roll the tone down. So it's the same thing, you know. For me, I'd rather on bass use steel wounds rather than like the round wounded thing for like the old school R&B thing. Because if I want the old school R&B thing, I can turn the tone down on my bass. That's right. And you know, you can mute different articulations, or even some cats I know put like a sponge.
Yeah.
You know, just
a lot of Latin guys do that.
Yeah. I mean, it gives you sort of that faux acoustic, faux upright bass, honestly, thing. But I think I'd rather do that than be limited to a flat, like, dull sound, unless, like, I was just always torn.
That's all it was, right.
That's all you're playing. If that's all you're playing.
Or when you get to the point where you got a company that's got you, like, 6 basses.
Yeah.
Then you can have, like,
right
with anything you want.
Right.
It'll already be tuned and everything.
Yeah.
When you play. I'm tired of this one. Give me another.
Right. And I know those guys that go, you know, they go on tour, especially when you do like the larger tours. You have guitar techs and you have, you know, a stand of 6 guitars that you use in the course of a concert. And so for this song, I want this sound. For this sound, I want, you know, if you have that luxury, you know, get as many types of strings as you want and try different combinations. But majority, right. But majority of people aren't playing like stadiums. So, and so if that's not the case, then I think you have to be a little more choosy, and or have something that can cover a lot of different tones. And so that's why I just personally I don't see the use for steel strings on electric guitar. But I'm sure someone's watching us right now and yelling at me and screaming at the screen. So I'm speaking as someone who just doesn't know. Someone's like crying right now. Steel's with, you know, I don't know. But, you know, I'm just going to put the disclaimer. I'll put the disclaimer. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, let me give you a little history in mind. So, you know, I went from, you know, I was playing bass first, like you, to guitar. And the experience that I had was, to segue into playing guitar, I needed thicker gauge strings on guitar because, you know, I was playing and the strings I was playing on bass were medium to heavy gauge for bass.
Yeah.
So switching to like real thin stuff, like I couldn't play on 10s.
Yeah.
So I needed at least 11s, and I was playing on 12s for a while.
Yeah.
And I systematically over the last, because I've been playing guitar for about 5 years. So systematically over the last 5 years, I've been going down in gauge because my goal was to get down to thinner stuff.
Yeah.
And I have a couple reasons for that. one of the reasons. So first of all, I'm playing on nines now.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is nines. Even my jazz guitars, everything is nines.
Yeah.
And I make all the adjustment with which pickup I'm playing on, how much tone I'm rolling off, and then obviously certain things with effects and EQing and stuff like that. So I have a Line 6 Helix, and it allows me to do a lot of, make a lot of adjustments and access a lot of things with just pressing one pedal. Mm-hmm. Turn stuff. So if I'm grabbing this guitar, I hit that button, or if I'm on this pickup selection, whatever. And I'm also playing on a Line 6 Variax, which allows that guitar will sound like anything. It'll sound like a Les Paul. It'll sound like a Telecaster or Stratocaster. It has magnetic pickups in it, and it is a Strat. So I don't have to use that other part of the guitar. But then it'll sound like a jazz box. It'll sound like an acoustic guitar, and it's not samples, modeling technology. And they've done all these like double blind tests, like, okay, which one's the Variax, which one's the real thing, and dudes can't tell. They get it wrong as much as they get it right. Mm-hmm. So it's really pretty incredible technology, and especially for it's pretty affordable. If you can only get one guitar, then that might be a good one to get. Like I said, and they have different models. They have one that's like a shredder model. Of course, it still has all those other sounds in it, but the magnetic pickups and the way that the neck is set up is for more of like a shredder guy. They've got a Les Paul model, and then they've got Strat model. I thought that Strat made the most sense for me since I didn't own a Strat at the time, and that was like something I wanted to fill. But anyhow, I was going to say that. So the history for me is coming down from heavier gauge strings to the thinner gauge strings. And I've pretty much always used nickel on guitar. Sometimes I'll use nickel-coated strings, like elixirs. I've used those before. But these days, I'm just using like super slinky Ernie balls, nickel. And and they're inexpensive. I think I'm paying like $6 a pack of strings.
I'll say $5, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they're super affordable. They're great strings. They're American-made strings. Yeah. And I dig those. So I'm playing on nines. Part of the reason that I wanted to play on nines was because I found out that two of my guitar heroes played on nines, or play on nines, and that is Frank Gambale and Alan Holdsworth. So I found out that they play on nines, and although it wasn't as obvious to me, some of the stuff that Frank plays, like with all the sweeping and stuff, that he was playing on thinner stuff, because it almost seems to me like maybe he'd need more tension, facilitated more of an easier sort of glide over the strings, so that the strings don't start getting spongy before you get anything going. But no, he plays on nines. Alan plays on nines, and I think Frank's his scale length, I think, is 24 3/4, because of course that makes a difference. If you're playing on a longer scale instrument, a thinner gauge could act more like a thicker gauge on a shorter, because of the tension. So I was trying to get the tension down, and I had started having some issues with my left hand falling asleep. And first I was concerned that it was carpal tunnel. But, I talked to some doctors and things, and they told me, no, it's not carpal tunnel. It's basically what it is. I'm an amateur bodybuilder. And so your nerves, they only stretch so far. You don't get more nerve because you gain more muscle mass, or because you become overweight, because the same thing happens to a lot of people that are overweight too. So basically what's happening is in certain positions, my hand starts to go to sleep because the nerves are being stretched, in a sort of the length of the nerve is not quite.
And nobody holds their hand like this naturally.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm surprised that every guitar player doesn't have some kind of issue, either with circulation, like what I'm suggesting, or just carpal tunnel, or tinnitus, or whatever, because it's such a unnatural. There's nothing natural about the way to play guitar, and I try to do the thing where I play like the classical technique.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get the body of the guitar down in between your legs. You know, and it forces your arm to be up higher. And the idea is that your wrist won't have as much a bend in it,
right?
Which is better. And when I start feeling uncomfortable, I'll do that. But you know, I'm saying all this stuff to say that the lighter gauge strings aren't as hard on my left hand. And so that was sort of a goal for me to get down to thinner stuff, to be able to play on thinner stuff and to feel comfortable so that I could, so it was a kind of a healthy thing. I was trying to, you know, listen to my body and try to make decisions on some of my equipment based on what I was experiencing in my body when I was playing, you know, and you spend lots of hours practicing and then you're playing on the gig and all that. And it's just a lot of wear and tear. And you got to be, you know, especially the older that we get, and I'm 42. So, you know, the older that I get, it's not going to get better.
Yeah.
You know, so if I'm experiencing this kind of thing now, then I got to do something, you know. So that was kind of my reason for doing that. But I feel like I'm still able to get everything that I want to get out of that. When I was playing on heavier gauge strings, I think that it was totally true that like playing like rhythm guitar stuff was not nearly as accessible.
Yeah.
It was a lot more work, and then I also wasn't getting the sound that I wanted to get. I feel like I obviously with the nines I'm able to get that, but then I don't feel like I'm giving up as much on the other side of it. I just try to do that by making, you know, adjustments in maybe the tone on the amp or that kind of thing.
Sure.
Speaking of amps, so what are you using? I'm curious, like when you play, so what do you use in the studio? And then what do you use in modeling is fine. Modeling software. Yeah. And then what are you using like on the gig? Just curious.
For me, strictly on the studio, I use Amplitude.
Yeah, that's
I use. I mean, I have here at the studio. I have access to pretty wide range of amps and mics of many thousands of dollars. But for me, the modeling is very true, especially when you get all the, you know, you can get the orange, of course the Fender packs, I'm trying to think of the other brands, but I mean,
you Mesa Boogie and
what's that?
Mesa Boogie.
Yeah, Mesa Boogie. Yeah, I mean, you can grab all those expandable packages and really have just a wide range of amps. And for me to be able to reamp something if after production is done and something's not cutting in the mix well enough, or you know, I can tweak on the spot rather than being committed to a recorded audio. Yeah.
And so the way, and for our listeners, the way that reamping works is you're recording both a clean signal and also the affected signal. And so then when maybe something doesn't happen the way you want or whatever, or you want to change the sound, you reroute this clean signal through the affected channel. And then that allows you to make edits without having to go back and redo the guitar part.
Right.
What's interesting with the reamping thing, and that's like one of those things that, you know, of course, studio guys have been doing this for a long time, but it's actually hasn't really become like a common part of like the, you know, like the vernacular, so to speak, or this the kind of guitar talk until fairly recently. I mean, I found that. I mean, I didn't hear about reamping until like a couple years ago. Like a few years ago, like almost like nobody was talking about that, and then all of a sudden it seemed like it got like a critical mass, and now like more people are talking about reamping. Yeah, but I still think that there's a lot of people that don't know what the heck, you know, talking about when you say reamping. Well, what's that? Like, right. It's re-record. Are you talking about punching in? Like, wait, I don't know what you mean. You know.
Well, and even in sometimes, you know, if it's the right amp and the right mic, you know, I still take a channel out of the clean guitar.
Right.
So I can have the committed you know, amped room and all that crap. But if I need to, if you know, I need to set up the amp again or set up a different amp and change the mic position, I have the dry signal.
That's right.
And you can push the same way.
It's
pedals. When pedals get in the chain, it gets a little more complicated. The more things you put in the chain, those are more variables that alter the sound and that. So,
well, one cool thing about my my Line 6 Helix is that it has, well, first of all, it's I mean, it's got everything imaginable, and the modeling is incredible. It's every bit as good as the fractal stuff. Every bit as good as the Kemper profiler, you know. But it's actually more versatile because it's actually its own interface too. So it's got 8 ins and 8 outs as a USB recording interface. And because of all that versatility, it actually has a dedicated pair for reamping. So when you record in, you can just select right in the computer, you know, those dedicated channels, and it's sending out a clean signal already without even having to set anything up. So it's very cool. But that's a cool topic. I mean, we could do, you know, that's the kind of thing you could do like a whole video on. Recording guitar and like all the different things to consider, like work mic placement and you know, we talked a little bit about amps, and you're talking about Amplitude. I like Guitar Rig 5. It's also very good. That's the Native Instruments version of that. Of course, I love Amplitude. And then, like I said, there's some good hardware modelers, like the Helix, like the Kemper Profiler, like the Fractal stuff. And then the fact is that you can get an amp that's pretty cheap these days that you can make it sound good, and it'll have all kinds of effects and models and stuff in it. And I know guitar players get into this sort of like purist, you know, thing where, you know, you gotta, hey man, the air's gotta be moving, you know, and, you know, they get into all of that kind of silly stuff. In the same way that I think a lot of recording engineers get into a sort of marriage between a certain kind of microphone. When we know that there's lots of microphones that will do the job. It's just it's a matter of, obviously you want to have the right type of microphone, but a lot of companies make good microphones. You know, it's not just one mic anymore, and it's not just one particular pedal or one particular, you know, amp or whatever. It's just lots of stuff that people can use. And I think this evidence of this is the fact that when you do research on all these guitar players, these great guitar players and bass players, like almost none of them are using the same stuff.
Right.
You know, as far as like pedals and effects and amps and stuff like that in cabinets, they're like all using different stuff. Now they might be sort of like you were suggesting before, Strat, Telecaster, Les Paul. Yeah, you see that all over the place. But then what are they plugging into? It's like totally different. If you just do a Google search for a particular artist's pedal, their pedal board or their setup,
right?
And you go to the images. There's a lot of somebody has released all of these things where they have like, it looks like a it's not handwritten, but it's an illustrated like pedal board for like all these different artists.
Yeah.
You just, when you do your Google search, just go to the images thing, and then you'll see like all of these. You'll see like all of these, these versions. Like I was on one like on Steve Vai or something, and some dude had done like 6 or 7 different ones because Steve hasn't done the same stuff all the time. So they had like his exact stuff. Of course, you can have all that stuff in his guitar. You can have his guitar, his rig, and you don't sound nothing like Steve.
It has his name on it, but
yeah, man. We didn't talk as much about bass, but we could pick that up again.
Yeah.
Later. But yeah. So, you have any final thoughts on this whole topic?
Well, the final thought is there are some guitar players that Well, let me say it. I'll just say it to sum it up. It's all in your fingers.
Yeah.
At the same time, because, you know, a lot of cats will go and drop, you know, $8,000 on all this high-end gear and can't play. And at the same time, I know cats that have $100 guitars that make that joint sing like,
yeah.
You know, one cat I know, there's a cat in Columbus named DJ Washington. That dude can pick up a $49 whatever, and it's in your fingers, man. He's won a baby. And then when somebody like that picks up, you know, a guitar that's worth $3,000, you know, then it displays, it makes the virtuosity shine even more. But it's a lot of this gear talk. It is important for the sonic quality of stuff, but at the end of the day, can you play?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And on that note, there's nothing left to say. I'm going back to the practice room. Actually, I'm in my practice room right now.
Right.
All right, man. Well, it's always great talking, man. And, you know, we hope that, you know, for the listener, we hope that, you know, we were able to touch on some things that, you know, answer some questions. And, you know, if you like these videos, then let us know.
Yeah.
All right. God bless.